Hello adventurers, it is I, Soulish Venture, and welcome to my YouTube channel. And for today's video, it is a Wednesday, so we will be doing a bit of world building Wednesday, and that is where I kind of cover different topics all about solo tabletop RPG sessions and my own tips for newbies in the hobby, and as well as updates for my games. So first we're going to be doing some updates. So one, Dungeoneer for Hire is on itch.io, and a big shout out to people who have already downloaded and played the game. Thank you so much, and I'm really glad you guys are enjoying it. I will put a link down below in the description to for you to download and view the game. And I do have some prints coming in tomorrow. So I will make sure to upload a new video of an updated playthrough very soon. So stay tuned for that. And then two more updates. So there are two games that I'm working on. So one is Valadier. That one is a long-term project of mine. I don't think I'm going to showcase that one too much on YouTube because it's also kind of a for fun project. So that's kind of my own little passion project that I also want to just enjoy for myself. And then my third one, I am in the middle of designing a potion making / selling kind of game revolving around the world of Kyrinth. And if you're familiar with that, that is all related to Dungeoneer for Hire and my solo journaling game, The Wizard's Missing Gemstone. So those are my updates, and I will keep you guys posted on a playthrough of Dungeoneer for Hire. So stay tuned for that. And then now, today's topic, we will be covering encounters and how you can design and adjust your own encounters for your solo sessions. So I have some notes here that I'll be going through, and then I will also go through some examples of resources that I've used that I personally love to use in my solo sessions. But before we begin, I do want to point out these 4 principles revolving designing and adjusting encounters for your session. Number 1, don't be hard on yourself. You have to remove that negativity. And I'd say, I feel like a biggest thing for a lot of us solo adventurers out there is that we are very harsh on ourselves, and we are definitely critical. We're always, I guess, comparing ourselves probably with other solo content creators out there. And so I just want to say for you to remove that negativity and to also just make sure that you are playing for yourself. And so you shouldn't be stressed if someone's gonna watch your playthrough or something and someone's saying, oh, you're not playing solo tabletop RPGs correctly or whatever. I would not worry about that. And so just make sure you're just embracing your session, you're observing how you play, how you enjoy, etc. It is a really fun, creative process, and I really hope that you remember to give yourself grace. And when it comes to solo tabletop RPGs, a lot of it too is just trial and error, because you are also learning a lot about yourself, what you like, what you don't like. So that is the first principle. Number 2, you don't need to stick to one system and stay true to that system's design. You can use other systems to gain inspiration. So you don't need to just stick to one system and feel like you have to stick to the original design. You do not need to do that. Okay, the third thing, embracing the learning process. So adjust anything that doesn't make sense and you want to make the session fun. So this is what I was kind of talking about in the earlier principle over here, the first one, is that you are learning a lot about yourself and your creative process. And so I've seen a lot of people who love to just stick to a storyline based kind of solo tabletop RPG where there's really not that much combat encounters, for example, and it's simply just exploration. Others, they love that crunchy combat kind of experience, and so they just stick with that. And then of course there is a mix. I personally like a mix of exploration, the narrative. It just makes my solo sessions a lot more fun and engaging for myself if I'm able to combine those three types of like encounters into a session. And then number 4, violence or combat is not always the answer to an encounter. And so I know for myself, when I first started to play solo tabletop RPGs, keep in mind, this is coming from a mindset of not really knowing that much about tabletop RPGs or the term like role playing, like in general. And so for me, I personally thought, well, if there is a goblin right in front of me, I'll have to attack it in order to avoid I don't know, avoid the same monster later on and down the story. And so I was always thinking, okay, I need to encounter this goblin and try to defeat it, where I have so many other skills as a player that I could use to avoid that encounter. And so I do want to make a reminder here for folks who are not super familiar with tabletop RPGs. Violence is not always the answer. And so you can use your creativity to get out of sticky situations, I guess. So those are my 4 principles. Number 1, don't be hard on yourself. Remove that negativity. Number 2, you don't need to stick to one system. Number 3, embrace the learning process and have fun. And number 4, don't always think that combat is the answer to everything. All right, so now that you have those principles, we are going to be going over the different types of encounters. And keep in mind, I want this to be an open discussion as well. So if you have any comments, any resources, or even like ideas of what you do in your solo tabletop RPG sessions, I'd love for you to share them with me and others, because I love this type of topic of trying to just understand how other people design their encounters as well. I'm always very interested to see how other people do it. So feel free to give me your thoughts, opinions, etc. All right, so the few that I came up with, but obviously I'm sure there are a ton more. There is exploration, combat, skill-based. I kind of associate skill-based with these two as well, social and survival. So I'd say here, what is this? Is this 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Yeah, so these are the 5 different encounters that I'm personally thinking of when I design my solo tabletop RPG sessions. And so the thing is, these can also intertwine with each other as well. So before I get into kind of the nitty-gritty of these encounters, I do want to say there are systems out there that are not made or designed for solo play. So someone commented on like one of my videos asking about ways to balance certain encounters. And so I reminded them that a lot of these tabletop RPG systems are made for a party of 3 or 4 characters. So a lot of the stats that you are going to see in books and stuff are not balanced well for a solo player. So you can see like my little image here of a solo adventure, but the GM is saying to chill out and that there is a way to balance encounters for just a solo player. So I do want to just make that point, that a lot of systems are not made or designed for solo players. But there are ways for you to adjust that system to make it solo friendly. All right, so for the first example, we are going to go over exploration. So I drew a little diagram over here. You can see here, this is like a little, I don't know what to call this, but like a little region of a map that you are exploring. So I say that my PC will start here, and my PC wants to travel to any of these surrounding locations, but they don't know what to expect. And this is where you bring in oracles and other random tables that you like to use for exploring. So you can see these are boxes. I mean, this is the same kind of principle as using like hex crawl kind of mechanics. But for an example, I just designed this table for 1d6 terrain. And so when you take your 1d6 here and you roll it, let's say I want my character to explore this this side of the region. So I can roll it. Let's see. Okay, so we got a 2. So that would mean he got hills. So when he goes into this location, he will see hills all around that area. And so now we can roll to see what he encounters. And so over here, I have my encounters table for specifically planes. So let's say he's over here and he encounters, let's see, we got a 6. Okay, so here, and I said over here, a 6 would be a stranger or a traveler. So then we would want to roll on the reaction table. And so let's see if this stranger or traveler is helpful, neutral, or hostile. Okay, so we got a 6, and it looks like he is helpful. So maybe this traveler is maybe like a traveling merchant or something, and he's selling you different items that you can purchase from, I don't know, maybe his travels all over the world or something. And so then we can get like a random table of items. You can use like the system that has a list of items that you can buy, and you can use that table to kind of see what you want to purchase, etc. Or you can even twist it around a little bit, and you can see maybe you are on a quest and you need help. And so maybe you can use, I don't know, maybe you can try to like persuade this traveling merchant to help you out on a quest, and you can like roll a check and see how that goes. And maybe now you have a companion with you on your travels. So that is an example of how exploration, at least for me and my solo sessions, kind of work. But you can also see that is mixed in or intertwined, like what I said over here, with a social kind of encounter as well. And of course, if we did end up encountering like one of these monsters, then we would go into combat. So that is kind of what I was saying, that a lot of these kind of encounters can kind of intertwine with different types of encounters and themes. So that is an example. All right, so something I wanted to share really quick about exploration. I really love this like sandboxy kind of feel. So there are 2 tools that I love using for exploration. So I'm sure you're not surprised, but I am going to show Old School Revival Solo Role-Playing Guide, and this one, which I also really love, which is the Sandbox Generator. The tables that I just randomly designed right before this recording, I got inspiration from this, the Old School Revival Solo Role-Playing Guide, and they have a really neat table here of how you can explore the wilderness. And so if you are using like a hex crawl map and it's completely blank, then you can use this table where you would roll a d20 to kind of determine what the adjacent terrain is. And so you can see here, actually, let's just roll really quick. So we got, what is that? Okay, so we got a 9. And so, all right, so for a 9, let's say we were on a plains. So let's say over here, this was a plains, and we want to go to the left of this area. And we got a 9, which means hills. So if we were originally on a plains, that would mean that the next area over would be hills. And then when we roll again, let's say we're exploring again, And so if we were on hills, and then next to the hills would be the coast, for example. So maybe we've reached the edge of the region there. So that's an example of how to use the old school revival solo role-playing guide wilderness exploration table. And then the other thing they have is landscape features. And so you can see here, depending on what you roll and where you are on the map. So let's say we are we're on the hills. And so if we're on the hills, and then we can roll on this table. So the D8, what is this? Okay, so we got an 8 here. So that would mean there is a point of interest, which I love. I love this mechanic that they added here. So every time that you roll and you get a point of interest, I also added it here, then you can roll on the point of interest table, and that would mean that your character can kind of see from afar something odd or interesting, something that catches their attention. And so for this point of interest over here, which I think is really cool, you would roll another D8. So that would mean my character is on like a hill, and he can see across this point of interest of a tower. So I rolled a 2, and that would mean that he sees a tower over here. And then I can roll on the D10, or sorry, I can roll a D10 to see what the description is. So let's grab our D10 here. And okay, so we got a 10. So that would mean we are seeing a wizard's tower. So again, that is an example of how to do exploration, very like sandboxy kind of a style. So that's an example of using this tool. And then another tool that I really enjoy would be kind of this over here. So let's say with your point of interest here, so maybe from your point of interest you see different structures, and then you can roll on the D8 if you are on a road. So let's see, if we're on a road, it says here, fake toll post, incorrect signage leading to an ambush, ruined road by nature. So maybe that would mean that there are bandits on the road, and now you have to get ready for either combat if you think you're strong enough to defeat those guys, or maybe you gotta sprint and run away, or try to work with them and come up with like a deal or something to avoid any bad interactions with them. So again, that is kind of how you would use this tool. They have amazing tables here to kind of give a visual of where your character is exploring, etc. So I'd say this is really cool. And on top of that, if you are doing an exploration, but let's say you're exploring a dungeon, they also have a really cool dungeon generation thing here as well. So a really great a tool here. All right, so more on the exploration side, I love this tool, the sandbox generator. And so this can be kind of overwhelming at first, so I'm warning you, this tool is probably not for like everyone. But they have a lot of different tables here for you to create a map, to create settlements, dungeons even. So there are a ton of stuff that you can do using this book. So here they use the hex map. I feel like that's pretty much like the popular one. And so you can see here, this is your starting hex, and it's the same principle. The next hex, when you roll on it, you'll see what you come up with. So maybe that's grassland, forest, marsh, mountains, etc. So that is a great way for you to build out your map. And so a few ways that you can use this is you can either do it very sandbox style, so meaning like you are in this open world, you have no idea kind of like what's going on around you, etc. And you can play your character as you're exploring these new locations. Or you can just have a completely blank map and just map it out before you play. You can do it that way as well. So over here too, they have encounters per biome. So you can see grassland, you'll come across these monsters. For mountains, you'll come across these monsters, etc. And then there are features. So you can do landmarks, settlements, layers, a dungeon. For settlements, then you can roll on this table, and you might come up with like a hamlet, a village, a city, castle, etc. And then you even have factions. You can kind of create kind of the political atmosphere of the location that you are exploring. And then there are also events or relationships between different factions as well. So again, there are a lot that you can use for this. I actually am using this book for creating Valadir. And so it's been a lot of fun using the tables here to create the world of my board game. So, all right, yeah, so there are a ton of stuff in here. And this is only page, what, like 20? But you even have like landmarks, different tables for landmarks. So this is a really good tool. I love the events tables and the NPC tables that they have in here. Really, really cool stuff. So yeah, so these two tools, really good for the exploration. So yeah, highly recommend them. But of course, I will say this one in particular definitely has a lot in here. Like the, I think the dungeon generation, I'm not a super big fan of. It's kind of complicated. And so I'm personally just sticking with shadowdark and the dungeon creation that shadowdark kind of uses. I personally like shadowdark's dungeon creation more than this one. It's just, this one I just find too complicated for me personally. But anyways, again, these two are really great tools for exploration and just kind of creating your world, or if you want to play your solo tabletop RPG session, sandbox style. So next, I do want to cover a little bit about combat. So the thing about combat, I will say, is when you look at stats for monsters and such, you will see, so for example, in this system, basic fantasy role-playing game, the monsters here listed out in this book are not solo friendly. And so there are a lot of things that I personally adjust when it comes to monster stats. I know for monster combat encounters, there are solo rules that I found online using the basic fantasy role-playing game. And so there are a few ways that you can do it. You can adjust these stats and divide it by 3 or 4. That's sometimes like what I do. I know the YouTube channel Geek Gamers, I think that's what they did for D&D 5e. Combat encounters is they choose like level 0, or I forgot what the label is. Challenge rating? Yeah, like challenge rating like 0 to like 2, I think, for their solo combat encounters. Like that's an example, and you can divide stats by 3 or 4. Another way that you can do it is to use these rules. I'm going to post them down below in the description, but there are combat rules for basic fantasy. So an example of a rule would be initiative. The PC will always go first. And then when it comes to rolling damage, so if an attack hits, you roll the damage die, and that you apply any bonuses or penalties and check a table. So basically the table would be, if a die roll is like 1, that means 0 damage. if the die roll is 2 to like 5, then you would do 1 point of damage to the monster. 6 to 9 would be 2 points of damage, and anything 10 above would be 4 points of damage. And so for monsters, damage is usually applied to the hero's like hit points, but for enemies, damage is applied to the amount of hit dice. So there's an example in the additional rules for Basic Fantasy. Let's say you are striking a snake and the snake has like 5 hit dice, and with your like short sword, you roll like a 1d6 and you roll a 6. So that would mean that you would cause 2 points of damage to that snake, and that snake now has 3 hit dice available. So that's kind of an example of how combat would work for a solo player. Another optional rule would be to use a they call it the fray die, and it might make sessions a little too easy. It's basically like an extra die, and so you can use the fray die every combat round to inflict damage on enemies in range that have the same or less hit dice than their level, with no need of an attack roll. So basically, if there's like a monster you are encountering, but there's like surrounding other like minions, then you can use like the fray die for those surrounding monsters. For me personally, I keep encounter like numbers like 1 to 2. I've tried 3, and I personally found 3 monster encounters for a solo player a little tedious to like track, and so I'd say it's really up to you how you want to do it. Yeah, I think another rule that I use too is like if I do extra damage to that monster and that monster is already dead, then I apply the remaining to other monsters that are around in that combat encounter as well. So again, there's a lot that kind of goes more into that, but I'll post some the rules for the solo rules for Basic Fantasy role-playing game, and make sure I will link that so you guys can check it out. So that is an example of combat and like rules for combat using Basic Fantasy. And now for combat for Shadowdark. So I know Shadowdark has Solo Dark, which is their rules specifically for solo. So this is an example here. So I think for this, they don't really have like combat specific, but the way that I interpreted these modified rules, it sounds like this is more for a party of like 3 or 4, maybe actually a party for like 2 to 4 players. And so these are the modified rules, because I saw here group initiative, where you choose one character and one enemy to make initiative checks on behalf of their respective groups. And then for the luck tokens, which I personally like in the Shadowdark system, if you roll a natural 20, you gain a luck token, and you can have as many luck tokens as you have PCs in your group. And so for characters, the focus of your game is on the players and their class levels. And so you would basically, use the standard Shadowdark character creation rules. But if you do have one PC, so like what they said here, consider starting at a higher level. And so I haven't tested this out like super well yet, but that's kind of what I'm doing for my Shadowdark campaign, the Pits of the Thieving Warriors, with my PC Drago. He is a level 3 fighter. And so I do kind of want to test that out to see what combat is kind of like. And so I can also just design my own encounters as well, because I saw over here that there is, I haven't read this part like super in depth yet, but there is a section on designing monsters. And so there are monster levels to determine its like power level. And so you can see here 0 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9, and 10 and up. And so And then you can also see here that the average party level, so for my character, since he is a level 3, we probably would want to make monster level, we probably want to make monsters at level 1. So that is an example. And yeah, that's probably how I'm going to be doing that. And so, yeah, and I think the other thing too, when it comes to the monster stats in here, I mean, I could do the same thing like I suggested for basic fantasy, or any system really, is to like divide stats by 3 or 4. But there are different combat rules for this. It's kind of the same thing as the basic fantasy solo rules, where incoming damage, I can modify the damage dealt per die. So if I roll like a 0 or a 1, that'd be 0 damage. A 2 to a 4 would be 1. 5 to 7 would be 2. 8 to 9 would be 3, and 10 up would be 4. So that would be an example. I will link below these like optional combat rules. I think it's more for just OSR in general, but it's called One Torch, and I really like the rules that they've described there, and I'm definitely going to be applying it when I play Shadowdark. So anyways, yeah, so that's kind of the basics of kind of adjusting combat mechanics and stats for encounters for a solo player. Next, we will go into skill-based, social, and survival. I'm going to actually kind of combine the 3 a little bit. So I'm thinking for social, like what I said earlier, in my previous example, I have a PC and he meets up with a random stranger, and that stranger happens to be a merchant, and that merchant is like selling different things or whatever. And for my social example, I could roll, I don't know, like a persuasion check of some sort to try to convince him to join me in my party. So now we'd be a party of 2. That would be an example of like social. Maybe another example of like a social encounter would be if you are maybe about to meet up with a group of bandits, and then maybe using your social skills to either scare off the bandits, let them leave you alone, or you can even convince the bandits that you would like to join their group. Maybe you want to take down this group of bandits and try to disband that group from the inside or something. So you're kind of like working with them, but they don't know that you're actually secretly trying to plot against them. That could be an example of like another social encounter. For skill-based and survival, skill-based survival, I kind of think of those as like maybe there are unique traps in the dungeon or something, or maybe as you're exploring, like maybe there is a rock fall and you're trapped in a cave, and then you have to figure out a way to get out of the cave. So maybe you have to do like some strength checks to, I don't know, maybe either like lift some like rocks and move them away to try to, you know, clear the path. That'll probably take forever and you're probably going to be wiped out. Or you can think of a different way. Maybe there are monsters in the cave who can actually help clear the way for you. I know I ran a D&D 5e campaign where my character was stuck in a cave, and a huge stone giant actually ended up helping him clear the path, and he was able to get out of the cave. So that'd be an example of like social, skill-based, survival kind of a thing. Another interesting like skill-based encounter that I love would be to use like puzzles. I personally love like designing certain puzzly kind of like things for your character to decipher. And so, like for example, I had a character who needed to decipher these like runes in order to open up a portal, and he could not understand the runes, and so he had to, you know, find a way to open that rune. He had to ask locals at a nearby village of who would be a good person that would know the history of these runes, or like who would be someone that would recognize the runes. And so that's kind of like an example. And then another thing for like survival specifically that can be tied into like skill based would be maybe you have a character and he's traveling but he doesn't have enough food, but he's in the middle of like nowhere in the wilderness, and so that is where you would probably want to do foraging. And with foraging, there's actually a cool design here in the old school revival where there are foraging rules, which is pretty handy. Oh yeah, here. So like foraging and hunting. And so you can see here there's like this table, and then here are the foraging results and the hunting results. So maybe you have to do, you know, a couple of like skill checks to see if you're able to successfully survive and gain food for your character to survive in the wilderness. So I'm actually kind of using that for a character in my campaign using the system Beneath the Sunken Catacombs, and she is a cleric, and she's traveling through this like region in order to reach this city to be with her cloister. And so she's kind of in the middle of nowhere and she's slowly running out of food, and so I'm actually rolling on this table quite a few times to kind of see if she's able to find some rations. Yeah, so that's kind of like an example of like survival slash skill based for a character. So yeah, I hope those are some good examples for you to kind of mess around with to designing and adjusting encounters. As you know, I know that some of you guys are following my Cairn campaign, Vinekin's Revenge, and so as I am playing that, I'm also kind of going through different encounters with like my PC Morgwyn. And so I feel like right now a lot of her encounters have been like skill and like social kind of based. And she did kind of go through a bit of combat the last time that I played that campaign. And so yeah, we're slowly kind of starting to kind of come up with different encounters for her as the campaign progresses. But anyways, yeah, so those are kind of my tips. All right, well, I hope this example of all these different types of encounters have been helpful. And again, please let me know if you guys have ideas or inspo of how you design encounters for your solo play. Maybe you don't want to do combat at all in your encounters. Maybe you want it simply like exploration. Maybe you want it social, etc. So it really depends on what you want out of your solo session and what you want your PC to experience. And so, yeah, I hope you're able to embrace the creative process. So that is it for today's video, and I will see you next time.